Hey Hexers, Function here, back with the follow-up to my drafting fundamentals video. This time, we're going to be going a bit more in depth and get into some of the nitty-gritty aspects of drafting. If you haven't already watched my previous Beyond the Basics video regarding the simpler mechanics of drafting, I suggest you do so before continuing along here. You can find a link to that previous video in the description below. I'd like to lead off by saying this video is going to be focused solely on the drafting picking process. After I go over the pointers, we'll look at a few first pick scenarios. Last time, I rather abruptly ended with the BREAD acronym, a tool which you can use to evaluate card quality. Keep that in mind while we jump right into my first pointer. Alright, so first off, don't get greedy. My further points will expound on this, but the fewer colors you're playing, the more consistent your deck will be. Unless it's really wacky and unique drafting format, don't expect to win often with your 5-color Rainbow Unicorn deck. Next, know your role. How do you plan to win? More or less, there are two broad archetypes to most draft decks. Are you aggro or are you control? Are you playing the short game or are you playing the long game? As you might expect, drafting each archetype requires a different approach. Many cards, especially removal, will be good in both types of decks, but if you're already going the aggressive early approach, then picking a 7-costed dragon in your third pack over an on-curve aggressive creature is probably not your best bet. Likewise, if you're playing control, you are generally going to be playing fewer win conditions, because you get much more mileage out of those particular cards. Third, have a primary color. Regardless of how many cards you are playing, if you have a primary color, you're going to have a much more consistent and reliable resource base. Try to keep the double threshold cards limited to your primary color, especially if there are lower cost cards that need to be played early on. Avoid having an even split between the two colors. Next, mind your curve. This might be one of the more important notes I can give you. The term curve references the resource cost of all of your cards. Unless you are relying on quite a bit of resource acceleration, you want the bulk of your cards to fall into the 2 to 3 cost slots. Many times you're going to be keeping a hand with only 2 resources. Ask yourself while drafting, do I have cards to play in those types of hands? Especially if you don't draw any resources for the first couple turns. On a similar note, most decks should not have more than 2 or 3 cards with the cost 5 or more. And the higher the costs are beyond that, the fewer you can have total. Having multiple cards with cost 5 or more in your opening hand is a virtual mulligan. You're basically starting with cards that you might not ever play. With a high curve, you want to value drawing and acceleration power. With a low curve, you want to value aggressive troops and cards which prevent your opponents from blocking effectively. Number 5. Having a high cost does not a bomb make. This is a follow-up to my very first point. Just because a card has a high cost does not mean it's a bomb. It goes without saying that a 3/3 for 5 that has no abilities is worse than a 3/3 for 3. But there becomes a point where no matter what the troops' attack and defense are, there is nearly nothing that can justify it costing beyond 8 or 9. There are exceptions to every rule, but for a card with such high cost to justifiably be able to make it into your deck, it needs to have an immediate and noticeable impact on the game the turn you play it. Next, what do the signals say? What are your opponents trying to tell you? If you're seeing some very powerful ruby cards being passed to you early on, it means that color is likely open. You should very strongly consider committing to that color if you have not already. The longer you wait to commit to a color, the more you hurt yourself in the following packs. If you yourself are passing very strong sapphire cards, don't be surprised during pack 2 when the people sending cards back to you seem to be grabbing up all the good blue cards. In a similar vein, during your first few picks, keep a close eye on what you think might wheel. Wheeling refers to a card coming back around full circle. When your 9th pick rolls around, you're actually seeing the cards that you opened in the very first pick. Likewise, once the 9th pick rolls around, you've seen all the cards that are potentially available to you. If you haven't seen a card you really want yet, you're going to have to wait until you open the next pack. Finally, watch replays of your picks after you're all done playing. This will help you remember what worked well for you and what didn't. Maybe that 4th pick could have been better and had a butterfly effect on the rest of the draft. How many different paths were presented to you? Do you think you chose the right one? I'm not quite sure exactly what Cryptozoic is going to offer us as far as recording replays goes, but being able to come back a day later with an introspective mindset can make a big difference in your learning process. Alright, my final tip here, before we do a few sample picks, is regarding rare drafting and hate drafting. If you are drafting to win, you should more or less ignore the rarity of the card. The only relevance it has, whether you can expect to see more copies of it when the draft proceeds. But by and large, the rarity has no impact on the power level of the card. There's a few exceptions regarding this, but I'm talking broadly. With that said, if you're just drafting to get more value out of your packs, then by all means take the card that pays for the draft, or the one that's missing from your collection, which you've always wanted. However, if you're just looking for a very specific card, you should go buy that card from the auction house or trade with a friend rather than hoping to get lucky. On the other hand, the term hate drafting often refers to when a player picks a card which will never fit their deck, but it's the only one that they want to, but it's the one they don't want to play against. I've seen countless new players hate draft with their first pick of pack 3. This is a huge mistake. If the entire draft pod was 1 versus 1, you'd be helping yourself out. But since it's 8 players, the likelihood of you playing the player which you denied a good card from is not high. Furthermore, the bigger factor is that you're more than likely hurting the strength of your own deck. If you hate draft a card which you have no hopes of playing, when you could have instead taken a card which might have made your deck, you're only really hurting yourself. If you're near the end of pack 5, or if you're near the end of pack 3, or any of the other ones, and the last 5 picks or so, sure, go ahead and hate draft. There's probably not much left for you at that point, and if there's a card you really don't want to play against, you might as well deny it from somebody. Okay, so here's the moment of truth. Let's look at a couple of first pick scenarios. Where are we? Here we go. Okay, so let's look at a couple first pick scenarios. Originally I put together my own workaround that would simulate a booster being opened, but yesterday, Plaga, a member of the Hex forums, posted a scratch-built draft simulator. You can find a link to the simulator in the description below. It's still pretty rough, and we've got less than half the total cards spoiled so far. So you're going to see many cards more often than you normally would. Furthermore, Sapphire has far fewer cards spoiled so far than any other. Also, the AI for the simulator is still very rudimentary, so don't think for a second that you're getting an accurate representation of what a draft will actually be like. With all that said, it's still a lot of fun to look at some first pick scenarios. Alright, so here's the first pack. Let's go over each card one by one, and then narrow it down to the ones that might be first pickable here. Surge Mechanism is the rare in the pack. Resource Acceleration can often be a powerful effect in Limited. Furthermore, by picking an artifact, we're keeping ourselves open to more colors early on. This card will only fit into decks planning to win the late game, and is quite slow. It won't be surging to the top of our list. Secret Laboratory is one of our uncommons. It is a little blurry, so I'll let you know what it does. It's a 3-cost artifact, and its ability is pay 1 and exhaust it to draw a card, then discard a card. Draw and discard is a powerful effect in Limited. Now this is somewhat expensive variation on that effect, but we also don't know how fast the draft format will be. This would be a very powerful card in a slower deck planning to win the late game. Oftentimes in Limited, the more cards you draw, the more likely you are to win. In this case, you have the chance to draw a card you want and throw away one which you won't need any longer. It's no secret that the laboratory is worth considering. Next is Blood Thrall. Blood Thrall is a straight up bad card. You're setting yourself up to get blown out. If you cast it and then attack with 2 guys, then they remove one of yours with the last card in their hand, you're not actually making them discard anything. This is negative card advantage. The only thing this card has going for it is the artwork, and we're not flavor drafting here, so we'll be throwing away the Thrall. Ragemonger. Here's the first card that really jumps out at me. I've talked about this guy making the cut in my Mono Ruby aggro constructed deck in my very first video. He's even better in Limited. He is an aggressive creature and conditional removal all packaged into one card. You play this on turn 3, and you'll have your opponents raging in no time. Next up is Giant Corpse Fly. It isn't necessarily a good card, but it's not entirely awful either. It's below the curve, being a 1/1 flyer for 3, but we do get a little bit of card advantage from it. Keep in mind that the opponent chooses what card they discard, and that if they have none in hand, then you lose out completely. If it had to attack, it'd be a bit more reasonable, and with only one defense, this card is going to be becoming a corpse pretty quickly. Wild Growth. This is a very powerful combat trick, or a potential way to squeeze through 4 more damage onto your opponent. It could even serve the purpose of blanking one of your opponent's removal cards if they are going after one of your crucial troops. Wild Growth is quite good. If you're playing green, you probably want at least a couple copies of it, but it's not the kind of card you want to be picking early. Finally, there are also 4 wild cards in the pack, all of which are playable. It's pretty reasonable to expect that one might wheel back to us. Never underestimate the power of angry giant squirrels. They'll do anything to protect their nuts. Alright, here's another wild card. Ruinier Commander is an aggressive wild creature. He really only starts out as a 1/1 for 1. This is not the strongest aggro card in the pack, and it's really not that strong in general either. The only time I'd be taking this guy at all is if I had a lot of synergy with other Shinhair, and that's not going to be first pick. You'd think that a dude who's the commander would be a little stronger. You're not going to be ruining many people's day with this guy. Alright, Call of the Grave. Well, this card might only ever make it into your deck as the 23rd card if you have a couple bombs and are hoping you can pull them back from your graveyard after they've been destroyed. Or maybe if there are some self-mill shenanigans, which would be pretty cool if they include that as a draft mechanic in the first set, but that's some pretty high expectations. Hey, can I borrow a quarter? I've got to phone a friend because I just realized that my first pick card is pretty much unplayable. Alright, Mangled Zombie. Man, blood really does not look too great in this pack. This guy could potentially make the deck way down the line, but you're going to be mangling your draft if you first pick this dude. Okay. Oh, look at Sensei the Milky Eye. He's so cute. Look at him, little samurai bunny. Yeah, anyways, he's a decent cantrip, meaning that when you play him, he replaces himself with another card in your hand. If you're building a ramp deck or trying to make it into the late game, he'll give you a little more consistently, and he becomes pretty solid. I wouldn't be too surprised if this card wheeled for us. Sensei says, sweep the leg and don't first pick me. Alright, Kraken Guard Mariner. Okay, so he's not really in consideration. Yeah, I think I was overvaluing this guy in my top 10 video. I was living in magical Christmas land, probably. He's a pretty dumb mustache, and he's definitely not half as cool as he thinks he is, and he's probably only half as good as I thought he was. I would not be very happy if I cracked this guy in my first pack. Moving on, we've got another good card, Briar Legion. There's definitely a good argument to be made for taking this guy first. If you take him right off the bat, you're much more likely to get a grip of them in your deck, and this card is better in multiples. If we're taking a wild card, this is the one we're going to take. It might well be the time to build ourselves a Legion. Okay, we've got 3 more to go. Oracle Song is a decent-ish card, but this is not the type of Sapphire card that we want to be first picking. Granted, this is the only Sapphire card in the pack. Potentially, we could take it out and try to cut and force blue. The person to our left would probably be passing us some decent Sapphire cards for pack 2. You'd have to be someone who felt very strongly about forcing Sapphire to take this card first. What's going on in this picture? I don't know, it's like a tree filled with cards or something. The oracles sing to the tree, and the tree grows cards. Yo dog, we heard you like cards, so we put them way out of reach at the top of this tree. Alright. Second to last is Repel. Repel starts with the letter R, and it is removal. With that said, it's very conditional, and takes a bit of effort to set up correctly. We're not going to be first picking it. Oftentimes you'll take all the removal you can get out of this. You'll take all the removal you can get, but this one's got a cost of 4. Even if we're already in Diamond, it's unlikely that we'd want more than 2 copies in our deck. I can't come up with any repel puns. The only thing I can think of is like rappelling down a cliff or something, and that's just silly. Yeah. Alright. Final card. This one's probably the one we're going to be taking. Good efficient removal. This one fits our deck whether we're going to be playing the long game or the short game. It kills their aggressive creatures if we're on the defense, or it removes an early blocker so that we can get in for more damage. Alright, so with all that out of the way, the cards we're probably considering are Secret Laboratory, Ragemonger, Briar Legion, and Burn. I'd be taking Burn here if the pack... yeah, I'm taking Burn here. If it wasn't in the pack, we'd probably be choosing between maybe Briar Legion or Ragemonger. They're both very, very strong, but Briar Legion fits into more decks. It's only got one threshold, whereas Ragemonger has two. So it's going to be more splashable as well. Yeah, Briar Legion fits into more decks, so I'd probably be taking him third, or taking him second if the Burn wasn't in there, and Ragemonger third. Finally, Secret Laboratory would probably be fourth for me. If it only costs two, it'd definitely be a bit more of a consideration, but costing three and having to pay one and exhaust it to draw definitely hurts a little bit. But yeah, on the Briar Legion note, finally if we first pick it and manage to get multiple copies, going turn 3 Legion, turn 4 Legion probably means that we're going to be in very strong position to win the game. Also, if we had a couple Sensei the Milky Eyes on our deck, we're going to be having turn 3 Legion that much more consistently. Even so, Burn is still my first pick. It's flexible, it's splashable, and it gets the job done. Alright, so I'll do one more first pick very quickly here. Let's do this one live. This first one I already had it prepped. This time we'll do this one live. Let me refresh the page so I'm not cheating. And let's load up all the cards into it. Alright, so there we go. Cosmic Elder. Okay, so this one's an 8 cost troop. It's this troop gets plus X, where X is your health and it has life drain. So every time it hits your opponent, it doubles your life and its power. That's pretty strong. We'll move on to what else is in here. So 5 cost for Rage 2, so it's a 4/4 for 5 with Crush. That's pretty reasonable. I mean, it's going to be attacking pretty hard. It gets bigger every time, and the damage is going to overflow. The way Crush works is any damage that beyond the lethal damage that's blocked, it just goes to your opponent, so it's always going to get in for the full value of its attack. Elimination Specialist. I really like this guy. He works pretty well if you've got other artifacts in your deck. When he comes into play, he can do damage equal to the number of artifacts you play, divided among troops or champions. He could potentially like kill 3 1-drops if you have multiple artifacts in play. He's definitely pretty good. Necessary Sacrifice. If this was a quick action, it would be better. If it also didn't cost 4, it would be better. But it's sacrifice a troop, draw 3 cards. That's alright. So those are the uncommons and rares. We've got Blood Aura, Wild Growth, Runs the Litter. If you were going to try to force like a Shinhair deck, and you wanted to commit to it early, that'd probably be the pick. Militia, Terrible Transfer. So this is going to be pretty high pick if you're planning on playing Blood. Wild Aura, no. If this was quick, might be better. Captain of the Dragon Guard. Yeah, if this one was quick, though, it would be too strong compared to Wild Growth. You would always just play Wild Aura. Well, those cost 4. Captain of the Dragon Guard. Yeah, I don't want him to be committing early to a 6-drop that doesn't really have that great of a impact, especially double-costed. If we were going to be committing to a big card, it'd be this guy. Atrophy. This one's a little loose for removal. I don't want to be first picking it. I'd be fine with it being in my deck, but it's not the card I want to be first picking. Charge. Target troop gets permanent +1/+1. It's another combat trick. If I was going to first pick a combat trick, it'd be Wild Growth. Peak. Don't let Peak fool you. It's not that great of a card. It doesn't replace itself. If it had a then draw the card added to it, this would be a great card. Maybe not in draft, but it'd be a really, really powerful card. It'd be way too good. Anyhow, yeah, Peak, it is a quick action, which helps it a little bit, but the fact that it doesn't draw you a card really hurts it. So we're not playing Peak. Really, I think it comes down to Azawa. If you're picking this, then you're probably be going Diamond Wild, trying to pick up some resource acceleration so that you actually have a chance of playing it. With that said, I don't know. getting an 8 cost troop first is pretty loose to me. I'm probably looking at either taking Terrible Transfer, but that's saying you're taking a heavy cost or heavy commitment to blood first. If it gets cut, you're out of luck. Granted, some of these are going to wheel, but they're not even really good cards. Um, yeah, I think it comes down to either the Elder, the Elimination Specialist, or Terrible Transfer. The Instigator's still pretty good. Um, this one is quick action, and it's going to be removal. It's also going to get you back into the game. Yeah, I think it comes back to these two. This guy's still pretty good, but the fact that this one's a quick action and removal, this one's a bomb, so if you do play it, it's probably going to win you the game. It's going to get you back in. They can't really attack anymore because you're just going to be gaining a ton of life. Um, let's see, what does it come down to? Yeah, it's too much ramp though. I don't think I'd be playing it. Um, and I definitely not for first pick is too much commitment. So yeah, we'll go Terrible Transfer. All right, so that's that. Well, that's it for today. Hopefully you found this video entertaining and helpful. I want to thank Plog again for putting together the simulator tool. People are definitely going to be getting a lot of use out of it. Thanks Chemical for putting together the Hex database site, which was also used in part to put together the simulator. Finally, please go out there and support the other people putting out some really great articles and video. The Hex community is really growing fast, and I'm excited to be a part of it. Subscribe if you like my stuff, and stay tuned for more to come. Less fail, more function.